welcome to the Media Roundtable. I'm Dan Granger, the lowly schlepper of spots, here to host you through a wonderful conversation with our guest today, Christiana Brenton, who comes to us from FlightStory. And we're going to talk about a lot of things because we just got started with the interview, not even really meaning to. Just to anchor us a little bit, like if you think, if you're listening to this, you're watching this, because we also distribute on YouTube.
Yes.
When was the last time somebody offered you $100 million and you told them no? Right? Most of us have not really had that opportunity yet. I think we aspire to have somebody offer us something that is more than what we have today. But $100 million is still a lot of money in 2025. And to be able to actually decline it and not be crazy is a whole nother thing. So maybe we just jump to that for a second. Tell us about FlightStory and what is FlightStory and why did someone offer you that kind of money and in a way that wasn't compelling enough for you to take it?
That's a great question. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here, Dan, and I'm so passionate about the industry and really looking forward to our conversation. So thank you. So FlightStory, for those of you new to us, not necessarily consumer-facing brand, we are a media and investment company founded by Stephen Bartlett, the host of now the world's second biggest podcast, The Diary of a CEO. So FlightStory has two distinct divisions. There's FlightStory Studio, which is the media side of our business, and there's FlightStory Fund, which is the investment arm. That's quite unique if you think about our infrastructure because, yes, we scale media and, yes, we have multiple monetization opportunities available to us, but also, yes, we actually reinvest a lot of the profits from our company into early phase companies where we can get preferential equity and we actually trade, not necessarily just capital, but space in our media ecosystem to help grow those brands. So that's point one that's quite unique in our ecosystem. So FlightStory Studio, the media side of the business, which is what myself and Georgie Holt, my business partner, co-founded with Stephen 18 months ago, is really a media company designed to leverage the what we'd call proprietary methodologies and technology stack that has scaled the Diary of a CEO, or what we call the blueprint. And to leverage this blueprint to help scale and launch new shows, new creators, new creator-led brands into the world. And to understand the value of the blueprint, I think you first need to understand the sheer growth trajectory of Diary of a CEO because it bucks every single industry trend. And I promise you I'll answer the other question about the 100 million, but it's all connected.
Before you do, I just need to clarify. 18 months, you're saying you went from zero to this in 18 months?
Yes.
There was not 10 years behind. I mean, I know some of the story, but I didn't realize it was that fast.
Well, to be fair, the Diary of a CEO team existed. So they started distributing meaningfully on YouTube about 5 years ago.
Okay.
So the core Diary of a CEO team, which was about 20 people, already existed. And at that time, it was a little bit of a hobby for Stephen. I don't know how much you know about his earliest context, but he actually scaled a social media agency called Social Chain. And herein lies where his obsession with understanding social algorithms and growth hacking began.
Took it public, as I understand.
He did. He took it public. And then the Diary of a CEO became a hobby. And then he applied that same obsession to understanding algorithmic trends, that same mindset of experimentation to the podcasting world. And at the time, filming the thing was very rare. So Stephen started filming his content way before it became popular and commonplace as it is today. So he first started filming and distributing on YouTube over 5 years ago, and certainly one of the first creators in the European market to understand the disruptive potential of being video first. And from his perspective, he always says he came into the industry with such naivete. He didn't know that a podcast should be audio and that you should distribute it on podcast RSS. He was a social native. He scaled a social agency. He understood social algorithms, and he just took that first principle thinking into the podcasting world. And little did he know that he was creating a whole new kind of distribution ecosystem, a whole new way of doing things. But he understood ultimately in a really simple sense that if you film the thing, you are significantly widening your distribution potential. And it's as simple as that, because he knew that one of the biggest challenges he would find is discoverability. And so if you are limited only to podcast platforms, your discoverability is just
terrible.
Shrinks.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that because I always feel like as much as we talk about videos, kind of invasion of podcasts or takeover of podcasts, I don't know that it's so much because of the incremental value of having video, so much as it is the promotional capability, right? Because audio never has still, the platforms have really not figured out how to make promotion a viable function. And YouTube nailed it, right? And the social platforms nail it. And so to me, it seems like the promotional piece is far bigger, far outweighs the value of like just being able to see.
Of course, because the moment you have a rich media video asset, think about your distribution ecosystem. So in the context of Flight Story, all of our shows are, of course, on YouTube, Spotify, every single podcast platform. We're on every single social channel. We're on 14 airlines worldwide.
Oh, well done.
We're on Samsung TV. We're on techno gym equipment. So wherever there's a screen, our podcast shall be. And it's all connected back to the reason why we said no to the deal. Because in order to do what we do, you have to pursue a fully decentralized approach to distribution. And the moment you start to enter some of these kind of legacy MG deals with the major podcast networks, obviously the incentives shift. The moment they're going to hand over $100 million to represent your shows exclusively for a period of time, of course they're going to want to kind of contain the content to their platforms. And I think we saw a great example with Call Her Daddy and Alex Cooper moving from Spotify to Sirius. And now you can't consume her podcast, the video episodes on Spotify. It's a static audio banner. And so again, you're already seeing those incentive shift. So it is all connected, because the reason were so compelled to say no is that we weren't ideologically aligned. The moment you say yes, it means there's going to be an element where you're going to have to contain distribution to their owned channels. But everything we do is decentralized. And that is really, really critical, and why I have such high conviction that it's likely never going to be right for us, because we want to be everywhere all the time and never be reliant on one singular platform. And if you look at what's happening with AI at the moment, and the reduction of Google search, the reduction of people actually consuming anything on a publisher's site, on a .com, it's so clear that the media landscape is changing. And if you are in the business of audience growth, which we are, above all, you can call us a podcast company, a media company. We're really obsessed about scaling IP and scaling that across the world as fast as humanly possible. And so if you're in the business of growth, you have to understand the shifts that are happening. Consumers aren't really, getting their content on one singular platform anymore. It's everywhere all the time. So you have to design a system in which is really enabling you to take advantage of that. And it would be remiss of me not to speak of the advertiser piece, which is another one of the most significant reasons. But I have to tell you, Dan, as a commercial leader, I never in my entire life, to your point, thought that you would be presented with such a compelling offer that is really testament to the work and the commitment of the team, to command a deal like that and say no. But it's because these offers aren't free. The type of ad loads that we were presented with to justify such a number were up to 12 to 14 ad slots enabled in our content. Keep in mind, we only have 3 now.
And that's on how long a period will you only run 3? Like, what's the per hour average?
It doesn't matter. We could have a 2-hour episode, a 4-hour episode, a 6-hour.
Still only 3 ads. It's beautiful. And thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Yeah. And the reason that we continue to do so is because I think every creator in the world wants long-term partners. Every single one of our partners has now renewed for a 3rd year in a row. 6 to 12 month average buy.
You're batting 1,000 on your partners. What does that vetting process look like for you guys? How do you decide who you're going to take on?
The same thing I'm sure you've heard a million times before. It has to feel authentic. It has to resonate both with Stephen and our other creators, of course, Paul C. Brunson, Davina McCall. It has to add value to the audience. And again, it's all connected because, we'll get to our diversified income streams that I mentioned. Direct ad sales is only 50%. And when you're not overly reliant on advertising income, you can be more selective. It's this kind of beautiful virtuous cycle that because we're diversified, and the only way that we've become diversified is because we've been obsessed with growth. What has enabled our growth? Video first. It's all connected in my mind. Then because we've grown our IP to such an extent, we then unlock other income streams, speaking, live events, product and e-com, social indirects, publishing. But because we rely on other streams, then we can be a lot more intentional, authentic about who we say yes to. Because ultimately, if you're a creator and you're only reliant on advertising partners for your sole income, of course you're going to find a way to make everything work. even if it's at the expense of authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
you know, even if it's at the expense of ad loads, that ultimately starts eroding the performance of the channel, which is something that I am so passionate about because I know what happens. The moment it stops working, advertisers will redirect their budgets. And I spoke about this at the IAB upfronts, I think it was 3 years ago at the time when I was still with Acast, that we're seeing vast majority of all ad spend concentrated in the top shows alone. And that's creating this inflated CPM, high ad loads. And I really do think that if we're not very careful, it's going to start impacting performance. And the moment it doesn't prove out, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Everybody, we move the money. I mean, so we put out, you guys are participating in our Chief Audio Officer Summit this year. And thank you very much for that.
We're looking forward to it.
But last year we put out our pod load report. This year we're going to present an updated version of it just with all the new data in the last 12 months. But basically what we figured out, just looking across brands and shows, where's the cliff on how many ad units per hour you could run before you would start to see a diminishing return. And you can see there's a few breakpoints. And I think the first one's probably around 4 minutes, which is interesting. You only do 3. And then between 8 to 10, there's another steep cliff. And then eventually people just get numb to it. But we left radio for a reason, right? You did, I did, a lot of us did. And I think most of the folks that are in this industry didn't have the benefit of working with the analog version, working with the predecessor, and seeing the problems that happen and how much of the soul kind of gets extracted out of it when 20% of your time is spent in commercials that people are just now conditioned to tune out of, go do something else, come back, go check another channel, come back. People aren't going to put up with it. And especially now that you can skip,
Yeah, not just people, marketers.
Yeah.
I think you and I don't want to assume, but you seem genuinely passionate about having empathy for advertisers. We treat the commitment of our clients like Shopify, like NetSuite, like Oracle, like LinkedIn, they're spending millions with us annually. That to me, we talk about that exchange around, we're talking about earlier around, those those first kind of direct sales partners we had in our radio time when they were saying, this is my whole budget for the year. Please, it has to prove performance. I still have that same mentality, or almost, I guess, as a healthy element of fear. It has to work. Because if someone is going to transact that volume of trust in you, we're talking about millions of dollars of advertising budgets, and they're saying, I choose you. In a world that I could be on any channel in the world, where I could advertise on millions of creator shows, I'm choosing to spend millions of dollars with you. And I think something I would say is also unique about Story is that there's a high humility that is encompassed in our business. And when you have that humility, I think, high humility, low ego, it's one of our core values, that we're not going to have ego. We're never going to get scaled to such an extent that, for example, we start forcing advertisers to buy a certain way, minimum spends, ad tech fees, all of the things that I'm sure you've experienced in your agency. And I think even though it's harder in the short term, because of course it would be easy to say yes to that deal.
Yeah.
Huge. I'm sure the whole team would have had an incentive.
Yeah.
It's harder in the long run, but I think if you have an infinite mindset of wanting to build, I suppose, a generational company that's going to have positive impact in the world, then there is no other decision but following what is right, because, people really complicate advertising and sales. I think on a first principle basis, you just have to actually care about the results, not your quota, not your target. You just have to care.
Well, it's so interesting because, you can go to Cannes and you can see an ad world, a marketing universe that feels very different than the one you're describing, where it's really about the party, it's about the access, it's about what's the path of least resistance to check the box and buy the impression that checks the boxes that my bosses and the 20 layers above them need checked, right? And I've always struggled, I think probably because I was like a foot soldier knocking on doors and having to talk to and build relationships with the person who was dependent on the outcome. It was it felt like selling a broken product, like something like you sold something that did not do the thing that you told them it was going to do. But the hard thing with advertising is you can't always control it, but you can control a lot of it, right? And you can decide how to manage expectations and how to position them for success and de-risk it, but it's a lot of work, right? And so not everybody wants to do that, but
that's our strategic advantage, both Oxford Road and FlightStory, because we're willing to do the work.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true. Now, do Fortune 500 brands want that work?
Well,
do the largest companies want it?
This is one of the.
Is it performance forever?
I mean, I think it's performance forever. I think it's effectiveness forever. But I'm an optimist. Do you know I've never been to Cannes? And I think for the same reasons that you're just sharing, because I don't feel ideologically aligned to that way of doing business. Mm-hmm. I think obviously relationships are important, and I spend a lot of time nurturing them. I spend a lot of time with your team. I go to all of the, obviously, podcast movements, and I'm really looking forward to the summit. Spend a lot of time with Miranda. But the world of the Cannes, you can see it's so transparent. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm an optimist, and that has served me well in my career. I feel if you stick to that approach, I don't know if this is too optimistic, but I mean, I feel so fortunate to how far I've come in my career. And it's really been on a really simple approach of just genuinely caring. We're scaling our partnership team at the moment, and I won't hire anyone that doesn't actually understand media science, know how to implement a campaign, understand how pixel-based attribution work or measurement. And I've always felt that there's really two kinds of salespeople in the world. The people that are probably this is quite scathing for anyone out there, predominantly relationship driven without being impact driven. Mm-hmm. And then those that are actually deeply curious. Mm-hmm. And I typically define it in two ways, having been fortunate enough to lead sales teams all over the world now. Seller 1 gets an email from Oxford Road and there's a brief. They read the brief on face value and they reply. Partnership Director 2 reads the brief, picks up the phone to Miranda, and asks a million more questions.
I love that.
And I'm telling you, it's A or B. And I've never really seen anyone in the middle. And we're in the business of trying to recruit and find more of the
That's hard.
Example 2.
That's hard.
That genuinely are curious and interested and care. Yeah. Because look what happens. Then you can broker really meaningful long-term partnerships.
It's so refreshing. Because you just don't. I don't know the last time.
So optimistic.
No, well, and you're romantic about it, which is so beautiful. I am very romantic about it.
But I liked your other point around, do they care in terms of the top Fortune 500 companies? One of the things that, again, I spoke about at the IB Upfronts a few years ago is what I would call this efficiency bias.
Yeah.
A lot of agencies, and certainly the big 5 holding cos, just want to do what's easy, automated, and scalable. And I've found, and I'm not sure in your interactions, that this kind of complacency has gotten worse and worse over the years.
Yeah.
With the big, big 5, big 6. And I think, wow, isn't that a shame as well? And not to mention a lot of the legacy kind of trading deals that can mean a certain partner can be prioritized, regardless of if they're the right audience.
Yeah, I
right
think
creator.
It depends on why people get into the business. I studied David Ogilvy a lot in my career, and I felt that he was an example of somebody that worked with first-class brands, but he knew that his philosophy is we sell or else, right? Yeah. And he knew the job was to drive sales. The thing that, I learned over time was all of our job is to sell a product, but the difference is time horizon, right? And if you're a smaller business, you can't afford to cash flow and wait for the return to come back. You need it now. And then hopefully when you get bigger, you still need the return. You just can, you can be Coca-Cola, have a multi-generational strategy. You don't need somebody to run out and go buy a case of a Coke today and make sure that it pencils. But the job should be the same. But I think we get into it for different reasons. We have different interests. And I'd like to think that the notion of caring about the result of what you're saying to people matters. But that stuff doesn't scale well. But I agree, it is a secret weapon if you can hold that. You have to have a certain amount of confidence, which obviously you do. You have to know you can deliver. And I think what happens with a lot of people is they come into this business, there's no real training on it. They're ill-equipped. And so, and they don't necessarily have the confidence that they're going to be able to produce the results. So they try to do things that are more transactional, slap your logo on this thing, get involved in this thing that's exciting to you. If you have a good experience, have a good time, and I'm not going to get in trouble with you. You'll still talk to me if it, I can't prove that it did anything,
I'm curious how you approach it. Those Fortune 500 clients, many of which, in fact, you have converted to Oxford Road. How do you think about it?
I feel like
What's the pitch?
it's not. I don't think we're very good at it necessarily, because I think when you're with a big agency, I don't think we've had a few companies that were with some of the majors that said, hey, actually, we know we could be doing better in this channel.
Mm-hmm.
And they've swung over and they've seen it, because if you're specialized, it's night and day. Like we could go to any, half the brands that you see in podcasting today are running through a big shop, and they're buying a network and doing a spot buy in a break with 6 other ads. They're running the same ad 4 times in the same show. Nobody pays attention to it. Nobody cares. Nobody's holding them accountable, right? And what's sad is when you can show that to a marketing team and they go, yeah, but we're just not really that concerned, right? Like they just don't. You can give them the data and say, I can prove to you that you're lighting money on fire. I can prove to you that you're buying the bottom of the barrel inventory. I can prove to you that we could drive a result that you could measure that would actually help your financial performance for your company. Most of the time, it falls on deaf ears, because people really don't want to take the time and put the energy into it, because they're so far removed from the result. The truth is they're going to lose their job or not be rewarded in a corporation for reasons that have nothing to do with that. And they just don't have that innate passion. And that, I think you have to be a little bit, broken in some way to want to take on the brain damage of trying to be responsible for somebody's ad. I mean, what a bipolar industry to even participate in, right?
I often joke it's low T trauma.
Yeah, but like, so we're all crazy, but
to care this much.
but I think if you don't have that bug, like I think it's fascinating when I found out that if I could get somebody to buy an ad on the radio, they'd let me write it. Like I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, but I don't think most people are bent that way. And so, I think people want to just go along to get along, but that does present a great market opportunity too, which clearly you guys are capitalizing on. I mean,
and certainly Oxford Road. And I can guarantee you there is someone in the companies that you speak to that does care.
Well, sometimes they do.
And when they do. Romantic in me again, but of course.
Yeah, I hope so.
Speaks to a systemic cultural issue with these kind of big giant corporations as well. Can you ever imagine building your team to such an extent that someone says to you, I don't care if this is going to provide a better outcome? It wouldn't happen at FlightStory.
Well, no, and it won't happen at Oxford Road. But and if it does, but yeah, exactly. But I think there's there was the old
it's a scalable piece, right?
Who is it that had the Chicago ad guy said, take my name off the door. And he, like his last kind of farewell address was, when this starts happening, take my name off the door.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel. You'll have to drag me out of there when we start accepting, like, we're just doing business because it's not going to have a consequence. But that's hard to scale. It is, and I think
I do acknowledge that.
And you make trades, right? And so at some point you have to say, I'm willing to wait for more money, or like a long time that it may never come, or I'm going to make this trade and give up a certain amount of those core values. But it sounds like you guys have your core values baked into everything you do.
Everything.
And
I'm not the only romantic.
Yeah. What are those core values?
Absolute default to experimentation. And I think this is something that really Stephen champions, which is an ethos of kill the guesswork, which is linked to this, high humility, low ego. So Stephen, one of the biggest podcast creators in the world, arguably one of the biggest and most successful creators, Forbes list, Times 100. Yeah. If you directly ask him about a content trend, what's going to work, his default assumption and answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I will conduct a series of tests as fast as possible to find out the answer, and then repeatedly test that assumption every single day. So we're continuously learning. And it sounds, overly simplified, but it's true. Everything we do at FlightStory, behind the growth of Diary of a CEO, now the second biggest podcast brand in the world, second only to Joe Rogan, in the space of 5 years, despite Joe beginning in 2009, this upward trajectory is a byproduct of this default assumption that we don't know the answer. We don't know which guess we should have on, so why don't we test? why don't we look at the algorithm? Why don't we build tools that give us a competitive advantage to understand performance insights across YouTube, to understand content trends, to get direct access to our audiences with a feedback loop to help inform that editorial decision? Okay, we have a fantastic episode. We've had Dr. Tara Swart on the podcast again this morning. You know, creator A will think, oh, I know the title. I know how we should position it. Ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what it should be called. I have the expertise. No, we will test anywhere between 300 to 500 different naming and thumbnail variations before we go live. And the performance difference between introducing her, for example, as a doctor, an expert, a professor, a wellness coach, a neuroscientist, we test all of those different naming conventions.
You test that before you promote the show.
Before, yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then again for another 2 hours, which is ultimately, you know, we've drawn incredible inspiration from Mr. Beast.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well.
And again, the default, Stephen's default assumption he always talks about his naivete moving into the podcast industry. He didn't know what was the norm. So he just did what he thought was kind of the smartest way to grow audiences, which was to test. And then, yeah, I guess that humility piece is really, really important to us. And we have a big cultural value of no kind of island mentality in terms of doing things in solo. And, you know, we back the trend of, I suppose, remote working. We're in person first, 5 days a week, because we believe we do our best work together. And we believe that absolutely fuels our creative collaboration and our culture of experimentation. That's a huge part of our culture.
How big's the team?
There's about 120 people now.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's great.
Yep, it's scaled very fast.
And how much of the business is just the ad business on the one podcast? I know you have multiple.
On Stephen, let's use our flagship show, certainly the most well-known in the US. So it's 50% is via direct advertising income. Yep. So that's from our long-term sponsorship partners, and also branded content campaigns and social. And then the second biggest income stream is actually speaking in live events. So when you're a creator like Stephen, and in fact, any creator in the world, really, you're ultimately a thought leader. You know, you're turning up every day to hopefully provide something of value to your audience. And a lot of that can transcend to the corporate speaking industry. The third biggest is product and e-commerce. Again, once you scale a show to the size and scale of Stephen, it's now 11 million subscribers worldwide. It hit 1 billion streams last year. That is 11 million customer segments that you can then run focus groups, undergo pretty comprehensive customer segmentation to understand not only their functional but their emotional needs, and then leverage that insight into building products.
How many of them can you interact with directly through email or anything else?
We have a new email newsletter database for 100 CEOs, and that has about 100,000 that we can have direct comms with. And then we've also recently launched our new subscriptions offering called DOAC Circle, and we have about 150,000 subscribers there as well. So
150,000 subscribers.
Yes, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Quite a business.
Yes, shout out to Claire. She's our marketing director. She built the entire thing herself. The platform is hosted by Standstore, one of our equity partners. They're a creator monetization platform. But then in terms of the kind of wait list and landing page, I mean, Claire just built it herself using Replit AI. We just have this culture around doing a default to.
Well, and so tell me the story about how you got involved from here. How'd you make this? We know how you got out of radio, but how did you find FlightStory?
It wasn't part of the plan. So as I said, I started my career at Nova Entertainment, was exposed to Acast via a joint venture, moved over to London Acast in 2019. And then I met Georgie in 2020. And then Acast asked Georgie and I to move to the US to help scale their US operations and reset the commercial strategy there, which we did so together. But as you can imagine, that was a very bonding experience. And whilst we're in the US, we learnt about direct response advertising and podcasts. And we were incredibly inspired by your model. And so here we found, in Europe, podcasts were still predominantly considered upper funnel brand. And this conversation of the fact that you can actually drive a measurable performance outcome, a direct response from host rate endorsements, wasn't as I would say, well known in the European market. So Georgie and I were obviously exposed to that methodology and, again, the science behind podcast performance planning and buying. And then we actually decided to leave Acast in the US, leave our exec roles to launch Telling Media, which is our podcast media agency, specializing in podcasts as a growth marketing / direct response channel. And so we launched that in July. We won our first series of clients, all, fitting the bill, these kind of fast growth D2C clients looking to, scale their business through podcast advertising. And, we were kind of blissfully ignorant or unaware of what was about to happen to us. And so that was July we launched Telling Media. And in October that same year, Stephen Bartlett posted on LinkedIn that he had ambitions of scaling a new media company after the phenomenal success of Diary of a CEO, and that he was really haunted by the potential of what he felt he could do for other creator-led brands who had, a meaningful message to share with the world. And Georgie and I, we still have the WhatsApp exchange. We're both night owls. So I think at about 1 a.m., she messaged me saying, "Did you see Stephen's post?" I said, "Yes, we should draft something. Maybe he might want to invest in Telling Media. Maybe there's a way to work together." So we sent him an email and honestly one of the classic case where we didn't dwell over it. We didn't write it for hours. It was just a very, went kind of straight to trying to speak to him in his language. I've been a long-term listener of the podcast, and he's really passionate about not having a habituation filter, that everything starts to sound the same, which I'm sure we can speak on. And then we drafted an email. We shared a little bit about ourselves. I included an automatic link for him to schedule a meeting with me. I never thought I would obviously hear from him. We now know that there was over 35,000 people that emailed him off that very same LinkedIn post.
Who read 35,000 emails?
He reads them all. Stephen spends the vast majority of his time in recruitment. Because he believes, we need to try and find these A players. But anyway, the next day we had a call. I had a call in my diary. I was working in we were in a co-working space in London at the time. And I saw Christiana Brenton / Stephen Bartlett. I screamed.
Wow.
Just so the sheer, I suppose, shock. Georgie was in a meeting room. I ran to find her and said, "We're speaking to Stephen in 30 minutes.
Wow.
And we had a call, and he often says it felt like, very serendipitous was in the follow-up email when he met us. But it was immediate. We were totally ideologically aligned with our love for the medium. Talk about romantics. We all fundamentally believe that there isn't no other medium in the entire world that has such a positive psychological impact on consumers in terms of a channel that nourishes your mental diet, like podcasting. And think about it in comparison to social, TV, digital. In most other consumption channels and habits, it has like a negative psychological impact on you in terms of doom scrolling, fatigue, spending way too much time online, whereas podcasting is the only channel that we all felt, and certainly Georgie from her former background in journalism, that just nourished the soul, provided such a strong value exchange. And certainly from our perspective, we had never seen such impactful commercial performance for advertisers. And we felt that the industry, in terms of everything we've spoken about around the traditional networks, were just so limiting. And we really believed in the power of podcast media. We were talking about the fact that podcasts were going to disrupt home entertainment, disrupt TV streaming, which is absolutely what we're seeing now. And this is something that Georgie and I were passionate about for years. And then to hear Stephen speak in the same language, it was that classic equation where, 1 + 1 = 3. Here we have the creator that uniquely understands how to build technology and platforms to kind of remove some of the friction in terms of friction to editorial development, in terms of A/B testing, and very deep and unique understanding of the algorithm across YouTube and social, something that, Georgie and I had relatively small exposure to, having worked at Acast previously. Then you have Georgie, 20 plus years background in publishing and editorial, so deep understanding of editorial content. And then you have myself, always working across monetization, leading commercial teams luckily around the world, in Australia, UK, and the US. And then the three of us combined, it just felt like an incredible moment in time. And I wish I could tell you that the interview process was long and extensive, but we had one phone call. He asked us to come in and meet the team. Then we presented a vision of what Flight Story would be, the type of shows we would sign, how we would monetize it, how we would act and behave differently to the industry, everything that we felt was wrong with the current kind of status quo. And everything in that original, I think it's some sort of 25-page deck that we presented in, I want to say, November 2023. It's all rung true 18 months later,
Wow.
which is pretty, it's not that we had the confidence at the time. I think we just had the passion and belief that, yeah, we wanted to do things differently. And Stephen shares that mentality. And then 18 months later, we've obviously continued to scale Diary of a CEO, but we've launched 3 shows now using the Diary of a CEO blueprint that I mentioned earlier. And that, you know, originally it was all a hypothesis. Can the success of Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO be repeatable? How much is it to do with him as a creator, as a gifted communicator and interviewer? And how much is it? It's the classic iceberg analogy. And how much is it everything else that he's built underneath? In terms of this culture of experimentation, of A/B testing, of killing the guesswork, of removing ego from editorial decisions, making sure you're getting as much feedback loop as possible. And then we launched our first show, We Need to Talk, with Paul C. Brunson last September. And that's now growing 11.5 times faster than Diary of a CEO in the same period.
I saw those charts. It was pretty amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
So it turns out those values actually have some practical
Can you imagine our relief as well? Because it was all a hypothesis. Truly.
I can't imagine.
We wound down our agency. Yeah. We were in another world. I'm doing I'm a co-founder of a podcast media agency specializing in performance marketing.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's a whole, a lot of risk in that. But it sounds like there was a culture of, being allowed to learn, being allowed to, not get everything right, and not presuming that you had all the answers up front. And then with humility, I mean, we just in our merger, we had 9 values at Oxford Road. And honestly, it was too many for people to keep in their heads.
Yep.
And so we've distilled it down to 3 with the new team. And
I'm excited to hear.
You want to hear? Okay. First one is humility, mission above ego. Okay. Second one is insight. Insight equals market outcomes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
If it doesn't actually produce a result, it's not really insightful. And the third is ownership.
Oh.
Which, you can't, it's hard to teach.
Radical ownership.
I
think I forgot one of my favorite values, radical ownership.
Yeah.
Everyone's accountable at every level for everything in our org.
Yeah.
We have this, everyone has to be a builder doer, not a delegator director.
Yeah.
At every level, including Stephen. There's, dare I say, a lot we have in common.
We may have a few things in common here. Well, I'm flattered that you think so.
And building tools, right?
Indeed. And a passion for independence.
Yes.
Which I want to, if you don't mind me segueing here.
Of course, please.
Okay. I want to talk about a partner that we have who is supporting some of the work that we're doing to tell these types of stories to the market, and that is Libson. Do you know Libson?
I do.
And do you know what Libson, why it is called Libson?
No.
This is the best part.
Okay.
Liberated syndication.
Nice.
Okay, so Libson paved the roads on which we travel. They've been doing it for more than 20 years. And the reason I bring them up is they are sponsors of our efforts. And podcast, as you know very well, is getting crowded. Libsyn has really a full stack of stitching it all together, from publishing and analytics to making sure that the right ads hit the right ears. So they actually are reaching more than 200 million listeners every month. And you can do, they don't just have one model. They're building out a programmatic solution, but you can do host-read ads. And they are one of these partners that have always been champions of the independent. If you don't want to play the algorithm game, if you don't want to be dependent on one platform, you can work with Libsyn and you can go soup to nuts, and it's open to anybody. So live read ads, but they give the creator talent that they work with a white glove experience, as they do with their advertisers as well. So bottom line is clarity, trust, and growth for a brand. Libsyn is, in addition to FlightStory, should be one of your first calls. You can learn more about Libsyn at advertising.libsyn.com. That is LIBSYN, and talk to an advertising specialist today. So that's
well done.
Thank you. I'm learning about these live read things they keep talking about. I heard they work better than the produced stats. What do you think?
Definitely.
Talk to me about YouTube again for a moment. We were talking about that in the lobby, and we really didn't get to fully unpack it. And I think we all get a headline a few months ago that says there's 1 million active podcast listeners monthly on YouTube. Did that surprise you to hear?
Not at all.
Okay.
Again, we've been distributing on YouTube for the last 5 years. In fact, we see YouTube alongside Spotify, certainly now that they're prioritizing video as being our kind of primary distribution channel for video first consumption. Not only do we find that majority of our audiences are consuming on YouTube, but interestingly on Diary of a CEO, they're consuming on YouTube at home on their smart TVs.
Okay.
And we're very interested in that because what does that tell you? That we're on a trend towards disrupting TV budgets.
Indeed. Yeah.
TV budgets, according to Statista, $250 billion opportunity. So here we're talking about the podcast industry is anywhere between what, 3 or 7 billion. There was two kind of different reports recently, I suppose, depending on.
The Owl and Co.
Yeah, so there's quite a big delta there. So we probably need to check. But okay, so I'm sure we're going to get to the definition piece.
It's a good report. We actually helped Hernan. He was the founder of Wondery, and we were able to participate in helping him build out that report because we knew it was being undercounted. But he actually looked at some revenue streams that others weren't, and it seems like it's about twice the size of what has been projected to the market.
And what was included in the 7 billion, is that also leveraging creators' personal brand channels and social branded content?
Okay.
Put you on the spot here.
Yeah, you are, but it is well. No, I know there are alternate revenue streams. Like I think ticket sales could be a part of it.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's media revenue from advertising on other channels. So I think that advertising has to be specific to the podcast. But subscription revenue, undercounting of international. There was no way to account for YouTube's revenue for creators that put their show on YouTube and then they get Google selling it
50,
right programmatically. So there was just a lot of nooks and crannies that weren't being accounted for, and so he actually did the work to project that out, and I think it was about a 2x of what had been reported, which was good because every year it's been, oh look, podcast is up, podcast is up, podcast is up, and it was like, oh, we're going from 2 billion to 3 billion to 5 billion to 10 billion, and it's like actually we're going to be at 2 to 3 for the next 5 years. And he was able to, I think, demystify some of that. So it was an important report.
I'm very appreciative of that because, I mean, anything that helps to more accurately reflect the industry, it's a signal for other marketers as to why they're spending so much, I suppose, channel spend allocation. Yeah. But I'm even more interested in the trend to, okay, so if we believe the news, which ultimately we do, the vast majority of our audience consume on YouTube. Yep. I now firmly believe YouTube is the number one platform for podcast consumption. I think 400 million monthly users were
a lot.
Yep, a lot. Let's call it a lot.
Yep.
And certainly all of our audience's vast majority consumption on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so what does this do for the industry? And I think from a definition perspective, it's challenging, right? Because a lot of the buyers still see podcasts as like a siloed, let's say, audio channel. Right. So what do we do?
And do you position it as a podcast when you're talking to a new sponsor? Do you say it's a podcast?
Depends on the sponsor.
Yeah, right.
Depends on the team.
In the eye of the beholder for most, right?
We speak to audiovisual teams. We speak to podcast teams. We speak to influencer teams, content partnership teams, and gaining huge momentum to TV buying teams. Because what is TV now? If I can present them the data
what is TV?
Well, the vast majority of our audience, the vast majority of our audience are consuming Diary of a CEO at home on their smart TVs. Then how are we not disrupting the budgets you would allocate to Apple TV, to Hulu, to streaming, to Netflix, to mainstream TV, and not to mention we can actually serve a talent endorsed.
Which is one of the tricks that conventional TV networks missed.
Yeah. They have sponsorship placement, but the static banners.
It's not the same. Yeah. But
are you having this conversation a lot? Because ultimately,
my whole career, I would talk
TV.
Well, because even going way back, I was for a time I was trying to get the cable news networks to do endorsements. And they're like, well, journalistic integrity. I'm like, the guy's on radio 3 hours a day pitching gold, and you won't let him pitch another product when there's a camera in front of him?
I forgot about journalistic integrity.
I mean, come on. Yeah, right? Remember that? But no, I mean, these are talk shows. I get it with the reporters. I think that there probably should be lines. And I'm a big believer in the fourth estate. I think that advertisers in many cases have a chance to be the fifth estate and actually hold journalists accountable for the quality of what they do. Yep. So no, I'm actually those types of issues are why we started this show. But the application here, one of the issues that we keep running into, and I'm interested in your views here, unfiltered. I think the definitional thing is a bottleneck in that if people don't know, is it a YouTube only? It's not. If it's an RSS, it's RSS only. It's not if it's a video. It's all just a show. If there's no label, then buyers have a hard time knowing what budget they're pulling from. And it becomes just an internal point of friction that doesn't need to exist. That may be minimal. The other thing is we're throwing around all these numbers, how many subscribers, how many followers, how many users. When you're selling a show, at the end of the day, the advertiser first needs to know how many impressions they're going to get.
Fair.
Nobody gives you an impression. You get a download, you get a start, you get a view. All of these things are measured differently, and there's no uniform way. And I think that creates a lot of, so, you know, we do studies and we see what advertisers want. And there's I would say a double-digit percentage of advertisers who support publishers like you and Podcast One, that they will only buy based off of CPM. That is what they think dictates what the response rate will be.
Yeah.
Well, you can play the CPM game all you want, but if you're running 3 ads in a show and somebody else is running 20, guess who's going to have the lower CPM, but guess which one is going to work better for your brand? But if there's no normalization of any of this and there's no standards, then it gets very chaotic. The bigger problem is when we talk about measuring the outcomes, right? We know that if you actually believe that advertising isn't just awareness that is theoretical and never held to account, if it's actually supposed to drive an outcome in market, how do you measure that? Well, we had a pretty good thing going with the pixels for a while.
Yes,
and now, how is it that Google, of all companies, is primarily the main mechanism that a tech native brand, the technology powers the whole product. These are the most sophisticated brands in the world, technically, and they're on YouTube, Google, and they're using vanity URLs in 2025 to track the response and only seeing a fraction of the. And by the way, that's why you don't see as many marketers in that space doing what they could, because they don't have a way to measure it. And now you have to have, if you sponsor Theo Vaughn, you have to have one way that you're measuring the audio impressions on the same show for the same ad as what's going on YouTube.
It's very fragmented.
So you're asking advertisers to do a lot of work when you do it that way. And so for that, I am on a bit of a crusade just to try to get some standards on how we can measure, first and foremost, ad performance. But I also think that core connects back to metrics and impressions. And I think it'd be helpful to have a standardized definition. Your thoughts now that I've been on my soapbox for 10 minutes.
I agree. And I think I'm going to draw inspiration from Steve and our culture. I don't have the answer yet.
Yeah.
But I believe we can get there.
Yeah.
I believe that if we work together, I believe if we have all the right key players in the room, if we align our incentives, if we create the environment that will encourage the behavioral change, as per the romantic that I am, I absolutely think we can get there. Because ultimately the incentive for, let's say, Google and YouTube, I'm a realist as well. I guess there's a bit of the irony there, a romantic realist. Google and YouTube will only make a change if the commercial incentive is there for them. But I think that's coming, because if you think about YouTube's making a huge strategic bet on enabling more monetization tools for creators. So they now have their premium partner program where select creators can start selling their own inventory. And so if we, for example, a show like The Diary of a CEO, 11 million subs, if we are able to start selling our own YouTube inventory, but we can serve a Stephen Bartlett voice read that inventory, and we can increase our CPMs, and Google gets a higher share of revenue from the ad split from that exact same, ad spot, then I think that they're going to be more motivated to then help us with the, product challenge of attribution. But it is kind of wild when you think about it. It's Google.
Right.
And we're using vanity URLs.
How is that a thing?
But it's possible, right?
It's
if the incentives are there.
Yeah. And look, I think there's legitimate privacy concerns,
yes,
right? And that's totally understandable.
I live in London, so I understand. I'm GDPR.
Exactly. Yeah. And so but there has to be some way that an advertiser can see an output and we believe there are technical applications that can show you apples to apples if somebody is using a tracking pixel, or if they run it through a clean room or server-side data pass, that you can actually see apples to apples information about what your ads are doing in the market. And to me, that's everything. And so we feel like it's a bottleneck and creators aren't getting their fair share and brands are getting frustrated.
Well, that too, yeah.
So off we go on our quest.
But we will.
Yes.
Creator, buyer on behalf of brands. And it's so cliche, but ultimately it's about all of us coming together.
Indeed.
And there's going to be some friction in areas, but ultimately if we can all say, well, this is for the betterment of the industry at large, we're all really passionate about it. What we definitely don't want to happen is that we don't consider YouTube in kind of this podcast budget allocation. Because that's the worst case scenario, right? Yeah. Because you have an agency and you obviously want to deliver volume and scale. And if you're looking at the trends of consumption on YouTube, if you start to have to kind of cut YouTube out of your plans because it's not a channel that has attribution, well, then you're going to just completely dilute your impression volume.
Well, and I think that's right. I think what ends up happening, if it doesn't get resolved in time, then brands just start going, well, the metrics don't agree, so I have to look at these as two separate buys. And you either are buying a podcast or you're buying a YouTube podcast.
Okay.
And I don't think that's good for anybody. I think that's, house divided. It doesn't get the same ROI for anybody.
And how do you do it now? Because we're transacting with we're partnering with vast majority of Oxford Road clients, and we do both. We do baked in reads across podcast and YouTube simultaneously. I think we maybe have one or two dynamic campaigns, but because we're opted into the Spotify Premium Partner Program, we only have dynamic inventory available to the free users.
What I think,
you can edit that out.
What I think, no, it's good. I mean, this is a show for people that are tracking with that sort of thing. Right? It's not for everybody. We are not the number 2 podcast in the world, and never going to be.
I was talking to Stephen about it last night, and he was like, "Is that what you're going to talk about?" I was like, "Yes."
So no, but I think to answer your question, like I think don't sleep on the survey for now.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Okay. And I think that. Fairing is one provider that we work with who, we did a case study a couple of years ago. Somebody asked me to be their fractional CMO on a part-time basis while running the agency, which was
just in all your spare time.
Spare time, smart for me, great for work-life balance and family. Trust me, definitely do that. But it was with a good friend, and I got to learn a lot in the process, and I got to get my hands on the controls with some of this stuff. And so we actually got to test. We were using vanity URLs. And one of the problems that happens with the vanities is, you only see like single-digit percentage of respondents will take the time to go to it.
Yeah. So
you get very small sample sizes. If you have a $200 cost per acquisition to measure success, but you only see 5% of respondents actually doing it, then you have to get like 20 to sign up to show you one.
Okay.
Which means that if you're not a huge show, you're dead on arrival.
Yep.
Like you're playing Russian roulette. It's just very, very challenging. And so we need bigger sample sizes. So what we figured out is some people can't do like a straight promo code, but most people can do a how'd you hear about us somewhere. If you have the customer's email, even if it's post-purchase, you can send them an email and say, where'd you hear about us? And some viable percentage will respond and tell you. And if you give them a randomized list, and it's, whatever channels you're most active on, you pick your top 6-8 channels, whatever. So say they pick podcasts, you ask them a second question, which is, what show did you hear us on? And first problem was we were worried that there's going to be too much breakage and people were going to abandon, the sales funnel because you added friction to the process.
Too many steps.
We saw no breakage whatsoever.
Really?
And everybody was willing to do it. But using predictive text, it became a lot more feasible so that if I put in, BAR or ST or whatever, and it pops up, and then Diary of a CEO, because there's so many ways you can screw it up.
So you don't show it. It's not a drop-down menu, because that almost is.
No. You don't want to pick.
I've seen that though.
One short list, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
and
that's
so this was the breakthrough. Using predictive tests, they 2-3 letters, they tag it. Now we increased our visibility by 720%. For every transaction that they bought. And it opened up a lot of different shows that would have never seen the light of day, but we're actually doing their job and just not getting credit for it. And that's something that transcends. And I think we get so smart and sophisticated, so we think that we go, whoa, just asking people where they heard about you, like that's not
It's almost back to the first principles, I said, so, like, it's simple, really.
It's simple. It's not that complicated, but it actually still works. And I think that should be part and parcel of any healthy advertiser's attribution diet. But we know there needs to be other things too, and some brands don't have the luxury of doing that. And so you need something else.
Don't you think it's interesting though that how do they measure TV? So let's not let's put kind of those fast growth D2Cs aside, but more established brands.
Right.
How are they measuring TV?
Oh, they're all doing media mix models, or they're doing this bogus
but that's
time-based. I mean, I will say
I always think that there's like a double standard in some channels.
Yeah, but there was always this huge wave of attribution companies, 10 years ago, right? And it was all the same thing. They'd say, what time did the ad run and how many incremental people went to your site after?
Yep.
I believe those sample sizes in some cases could be legitimate, that you could believe them because the viewer is stationary. And you're seeing that with Diary of a CEO, that many times they are, but most podcasts, most of audio is people that are doing something else. And so they're not stationary. So they're not going to respond in real time. Away. So so if you hear a radio spot in your car and an ad in a podcast in your car, you're not going to go to the website and, take the time to do the thing you asked them to. So the correlations are hard. It's all sample sizes.
I mean, how do you measure? It's memory coding, ultimately. You're driving impact for recall, memory coding, and it is going to infer, or it's going to at least contribute towards the behavior. Yeah. But how do you prove that?
Well,
we can solve it.
Yeah,
we'll ask Stephen on Wednesday.
That's our part 2. That's our next conversation.
He's good at building tools.
Christiana, this is amazing. You're very easy to talk to.
Likewise.
We could have kept going.
There's a lot in common.
Time. Yeah, for sure. This is going to keep going. This will not be our last.
I'd love
chat.
to come back.
Tell me what you think of our outro.
Okay.
You can grade it. First of all, thank you.
Thank you.
That's important. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to not only succeed in audio and creator-based media, but we want you to use your influence for good. We believe that as members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but also edify, and to build bridges across differences and preserve fair-minded discussion around the most important topics of our age. You said it earlier, which is that podcasts nourish the soul.
Yes.
Podcasting is the greatest canvas in media for the free and open exchange of ideas. I believe this. It's very important that we protect it. We have to measure it right. We have to monetize it right. So you're doing a good thing when you sponsor these independent voices. And if you're a marketer looking to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, maybe talk to our agency, Oxford Road. You can also go to FlightStory. They can help you too. But talk to us, Oxford Road, by visiting oxfordroad.com. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter. Christiana does. It's called The Influencer. It's free. And we don't sell your data much. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any feedback, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And if you have humility, you know what I'm talking about. Tell us what you think, good, bad, or otherwise. info@mediaroundtable.com. Check out Ad Infinitum if you want to learn the craft of making ads work in audio advertising. And special thanks again to Haley, Ruby, Bianca, Kyle, Ezra, Prince, Everett, Neil, the whole team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.